Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help patients trust the products they depend on. And I will admit, actually, just so everyone knows, I've been already warned that my introductions are too long. So I will work on that because that is not a very good nudging behavior. In fact, that is something we're going to talk about today. I'm really excited to have our guest today. And we'll talk more about her. As you guys know, I'm an attorney. I'm a pharmacist. I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. So if you think about drugs, wonder about devices, consider cannabis, or obsess over pharmacy, this is the podcast for you. As a lawyer, I have to say this every single time. This is not legal advice, but you guys get this at this point. I do these podcasts because they're a lot of fun and because I get to learn from someone like our guest today. She's been on relatively recently, and I learned so much from her the last time that we had to bring her on again, and because she is so cool and interesting. So I think you're going to have a good time. But if you think you're going to learn something, if you think you've learned something, I encourage you to share this stream. I encourage you to welcome people to it. But I also recommend that you ask comments, ask questions, and subscribe if you can. If you want to reach out to me, you can also find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Regarding today's podcast, we talk about this very briefly early up, which is I point out that we talk about nudging behaviors. We talk about how do you get patients or people or clients to do the thing that you think is ideal. So we're going to actually land up doing something that I am petrified of doing, but we're going to do it anyways, because we've done this once before. And it was both. How should we put this properly? It taught me humility. So if you have your own website and you are curious how to do it right, you should reach out to our guest today. She is, and I should be very clear about this, she is a behavioral scientist at the BVA Nudge Unit. She co-leads the healthcare division globally. Her passion lies in marrying the worlds of psychology, public health, and behavioral economics to craft impactful behavior changes across the entire healthcare ecosystem. Prior to joining BVA Nudge Unit, Suzanne co-developed an industry-leading social science group at a global marketing network, McCann Health. She completed her master's in public health at Columbia University's Mailman School, and we are extremely lucky to have her. Our guest for today, Suzanne Kirkendall. Hey, Suzanne, how are you?
Hey, Darshan. You can call me Kirk. People used to call me that all the time in high school. It's fine.
I kind of like that. It's kind of a badass name.
A lot of people went with that's what was my nickname. Yep, Captain Kirk.
You can be a lot worse than before we start, Suzanne, let's talk a little bit about what we're trying to do. We've done this before. We did this with my podcast website before. And one of the things I really liked about it was the thousands of things that I did wrong. And but it was really interesting because you started to see human behavior. Is one website, if you've seen one website, have you seen them all?
Definitely not. And the reason for that is because it depends, every website is going to be geared towards a different audience, and it's going to be asking people to do, there's a common collection of behaviors, but you're going to want different things from your audience depending on what your website is. So there are definitely themes and categories, but there's not just one website that represents all of them. So this will be a fun, different conversation from last time.
So many new ways of humiliating me. It's going to be awesome.
I have to reframe this because I think you've been a wonderful sport, and you being willing to be kind of a model of a person kind of learning in progress is actually a really good way from a behavioral science perspective to teach other people. Because you know what? We learn more from watching someone who's partway to perfection than we do watching someone who's perfect, because it's such an unrelatable role model that we're like, I can't get anything out of this, and it's already done. So watching someone kind of in progress is actually super beneficial for other people who aren't there yet either. So you're doing a wonderful public service by being a really good guinea pig here.
That's exactly what I was looking for when I designed this website. I just went, how can I be a public service role model? And that's how we came here. But let's start asking another question. Is there a big difference between the the themes you use for a website on podcasting versus a website you use for lawyers?
So that was actually going to be one of the first questions I asked you is the purpose of each website, right? We talked a little bit about that last time.
Yeah.
What do you want people to do when they come to your podcast website? Was it subscribe? Was it listen? Was it share with their friends?
Yeah.
This time, I'm going to start by asking you similar questions. What do you want people to do when they come to your website? And then once we kind of figure that out, and also who is it for, but what do you want them to do? That's going to start determining the direction that we go.
Okay, so let's share my website. Let the pain begin. Here we go.
Here we go.
So so this is my website. This is the Kulkarni Law Firm website. If you've been to a lawyer's website, it feels like you've seen them all, but that's Philadelphia in the background. Okay, so ask me anything you want.
Anything I want. All right. So the big question is, I gave you a little bit of a hint. Two-part question.
Yeah.
First, who is this website for? Who comes to your website / who do you want to come to your website?
So I would like individuals in the life sciences who think that they need a lawyer's help to come to my website. Is that too broad?
It's getting closer, but who would those individuals be? Are they particular roles, particular career points, companies?
So generally speaking, the people who would hire me are often in medical affairs, in advertising, in clinical trials. And those are probably your three major areas. And they might come from a bunch of different perspectives. So you might have tech people coming in saying, I work in advertising compliance and I need some help. You might have a hospital saying I'm in clinical trials, or you might have a pharmaceutical company saying I'm in clinical trials. Generally speaking, the people who are doing it, at least the ones who land up talking to me, they land up being, generally speaking, director level and above. That's usually what my audience also looks like.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's helpful. And so when you have these people come to your website, if there was like the number one thing that you want them to do because they came to your website, what is that?
Hire me.
Hire you. Okay, so that's kind of the ultimate behavioral goal. What's the step on your website that they would do? As soon as contact you?
Yeah, contact would be probably the ideal step right before that. But what I imagine the journey is, and I have no idea if that's true, but I imagine the journey being, let's first see who this guy is, so going to our team, then see what kind of work he does. Like, can I trust him with my work? And then I trust him, let's go contact him.
Got it. Sure.
But obviously with Google, that's not how that always plays out.
Right. And depending on people's attention spans and kind of where they're coming from before in terms of background knowledge about you, they may just skip a step or jump around a little bit more. But yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So we're going to say the ultimate behavioral goal ideally is they contact you as a result of visiting your website.
Correct.
So we've just asked our kind of existential questions of what is the purpose of this? Because that's what's going to guide kind of the direction of recommendations. Because you can imagine if the behavioral goal was to watch a video on your website, like you decided that was the number one thing you wanted people to do, we would set it up in a really different way than with the behavioral goal of contact us.
So let me ask you a question now. One of the things I've seen is, I believe, according to Google, the two biggest advertisers are lawyers, and I think it's people who are selling some kind of supplement. But the reason I raise that is, to me, a law firm website feels like brochureware, in that come check out my website, here's a brochure about it, here's who I am, and pick up the phone call and talk to me. Is that the primary way someone should use their website, or is there a smarter way to do that?
It's a good question, and it really comes down to a few things. Obviously, behavioral goal. It feels like brochureware because your behavioral goal is contact me, right? Yeah. So that's going to necessitate a few essential items. You can change how those end up looking, but that is kind of the journey that you're hoping people to take, which totally makes sense and it's reasonable. But a lot of other law firm websites are going to be doing the same thing for the same reasons.
And it's kind of boring, though.
It doesn't have to be. But,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, it's not boring. It's just simple, right? And simple is actually really good when we're looking for behavior change, right? Because if this was really fancy and complex and it takes people a lot of, I always joke about how many brain cells are we asking people to use, right?
Okay.
We want fewer is better. Then you're adding friction, and friction means drop off at any point in this process. So you definitely want to pull people in, and we want to stand out and we want to be interesting, but we don't need to get like wild and crazy with it for it to be an effective website and serve its purpose. And that's why we go back to the existential question of like, what is the point of this website? Because if the point of the website was to entertain, then we'd approach this totally differently yet again, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that you can't have dual purposes or secondary purposes if you wanted to, but having a really, really focused behavioral goal is kind of the number one step that is going to set you up for success here. And whenever I'm doing any kind of audit of anything or any bigger behavioral science type project, I always start with what is the ultimate behavioral goal that we're trying to do, and you work backwards from there and how you kind of figure out the insights around your audience and who your audience is and what makes them tick, and then developing the nudges that are going to get you to that ultimate behavioral goal.
Yeah.
So that's what we have to keep in mind here. So there's nothing wrong with your website. Don't worry. Perfectly good website.
Well, let's ask another question.
Yeah.
And this is from a nudging perspective. Is the background of Philadelphia too boring? Not because I think Philadelphia is boring, but like when I see other websites, it's always a person doing an active thing, reading a book, talking. Like they look so interesting. I chose a more plain background, but does that, number one, now force me to look like I'm a Philadelphia-based attorney, or am I reading way too much into all of this?
I think I would ask a bigger question around what do we want to do with this homepage?
Okay.
And less about the background photo as the main question, more what's going to be the best use of this space kind of on a bigger level. And that's kind of where I wanted to start with my first comments here.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, we can talk about the photo later. The reason you see a lot of photos of people, though, just as an aside, is there's a lot of research that shows like we respond emotionally most when we see a photo of a person. And there's even like very specific things about those photos that make them more or less engaging. Like if there's one person, we really engage with them because it feels like, one-on-one, versus if there's two people in the photo versus like five, we start to check out because then it just feels like this shapeless mass. And if they're looking at you versus not looking at you, and of course, facial expression and body language naturally, but it gets quite interesting just thinking about the difference between like 2 and 3 people and how people respond to a photo like that. But that's why they have pictures of people usually.
That's amazing. I've never heard of that before. That's awesome.
Right? So interesting. Our brains are funny. So let's talk about this homepage. So whenever we're talking about, so we've established our behavioral goal. And so if our behavioral goal is get in touch, then we need to make that the easiest possible thing to do, right? Because nudging is all about removing friction so that it's as easy as possible for people to do the thing we want them to do. So in that case, this real estate becomes number one importance, because if people do nothing else on your website, they made it to this page. So make it really easy for them to contact you right here, right now. So rather than having kind of a what we do and a scroll and an option like that, give them an option to contact you here, right? Don't make them work for it. Not one little click, not one little scroll. All of that is added friction that we don't need.
Love it. Yeah. So obvious, but yeah.
Well, that's the funny thing about a lot of this behavioral science stuff is like, once you point it out, it's like, oh, yeah, of course, that makes intuitive sense, because a lot of us have a good sense of like how people work intuitively. But when you formalize it and lay it out, that means you can start working with it in more deliberate ways and applying it in ways that might not have occurred to you in the first place. But in retrospect, it's like, oh, yeah, a lot of times that does make sense.
But
that's kind of the fun of it.
So I'll tell you what I was thinking about when I was designing the site. I thought I want to start them on the journey to contact me. I said, first find out what we do, find out who we are, and then contact me. And what you're saying is no. You want them to contact you, so make that the whole point. Fascinating.
Yeah, I think I totally get your logic, and I hear you. And there's definitely still value in guiding people along that journey. And I have some thoughts about that as well. And of course, making it easy for people to find out that information that commonly they are going to want to know when they're learning about a new lawyer. But if we're really driving towards this one behavioral goal, then got to remove all the friction that we can.
I'm going to sort of pull it back to healthcare for a second, just so I'm on the same page. I'm sorry. My ADD is in high form right now. But let's say this was a drug website, right? Then would the number one thing we want on there be maybe an image of a doctor writing a prescription with the title, here's where you can get our drug. Like, is that the ideal sort of reaction or first splash?
So usually when we're talking about drug websites, of course, we have patient-facing ones and HCP-facing ones commonly, right? They're usually separate. So I'm assuming you're talking about the HCP-facing one. And, in that case, like, yeah, kind of. If that's, assuming the behavioral goal is prescribe our drug. That would be, model that behavior with the person that you choose to represent with a photo, make it easy for them to contact a rep or ask for a rep visit or, whatever it is that you want them to do. But you're on the right track.
And if I was a patient, same exact thing, I would go, the patient website would probably say something like, ask your doctor about this drug. No, I'm just trying to clarify and make sure I understand the principle you're talking about, which is the main action you want front and center.
Ideally, yeah, or at least like one click away, right? Instead of 5, for example. Every click matters.
Why even one, though?
Ideally none, but sometimes, also when we're talking about drug websites, there are definitely regulations and lots of rules about what can be where and what you can say and how you can say it and who you can show. And obviously, this, I don't need to tell you that. We're looking at your law firm website, but it's talk to your doctor about, or if it's like a patient support program website, it'll be, enroll. But yeah, you're applying the principle correctly.
Awesome. Let's keep going.
Awesome. All right. So homepage. So above the fold, this is your most valuable real estate. We just talked about that. So put your call to action here, right? Or if what you really want people to know is like a synopsis of what we do first, put the blurb here. Don't make me scroll for it, right? Put it here, put the call to action to contact us here or whatever side, but just put it without making me even scroll one time. So
what does the word blurb? When you said, I know what the word blurb means, but what kind of blurb would you have?
So so I've just scrolled down once for those who can't see. I've scrolled down once and you have some really lovely, really clean icons. You've got 3 icons. You've got kind of a headline underneath each icon, and then like a sentence elaborating. There's enough white space. The text is a good size. It's all very clear. Like this could just go up here. Like just don't make me scroll down to see it. Just kind of put it up here or something very similar. And then you've kind of just removed this friction of making me scroll, but you've still provided the same information and the information that people are going to want to know. Like, what does this guy do? And then, maybe right below that, because you do have space here, just put like, get in touch to learn more, and then let them enter their email.
I don't know how to phrase this, but I've never been to a website where the splash page, the above the fold splash page was all there was. Am I missing something?
No, you can definitely have stuff that if you want to put more stuff on your homepage, go for it. And we can kind of talk about what goes where. Yeah. But it's okay to not have to scroll forever. If really, and again, I'm not a website designer. I'm not a UX expert. I'm a behavioral scientist who's applying this to a digital space, right? So a UX designer might say, well, that's not quite right. But if we're really just pushing for the behavioral goal of contact us, these are the things that will help you get there.
Let's sort of draw that distinction, because I think that's a really important distinction. To me, I would think a UX designer is a behavioral scientist applying it to a website. And what you're saying in many ways is that's not true.
Right. There's definitely overlap. I think there's like a nice Venn diagram of, UX designer and, sometimes they have behavioral science background. Oftentimes people in UX do have very much an interest in human psychology because it does play into what they do. But UX designer does not equal behavioral scientist.
Got it.
So that is a helpful distinction to draw for sure.
Thank you. Please continue. I keep interrupting you, but please go on.
No, that's okay. This is a conversation. So those are the big things. In terms of, as I scroll, so like I said, love this. I think you did a great job with the icons and the little descriptions, and that all looks good. But then when I get to the bottom, I didn't even see a call to action here. So often when you get to people's kind of bottom of a page or a home page, there will be like a contact us link here as well, or even the box down here if it wasn't up at the top for people to enter their email to contact you. So so that's, we already talked about where to put the call to action though. So the other thing that I would recommend doing here is it's really helpful to guide people on the journey that you want them to go, right? So you talked about, I want them to find out about the services, the team, and be able to contact me. So let's facilitate that movement to the next page with some kind of hyperlink down here that's like, aha, okay, you've reached the end of this page. And the hyperlink would say something like, find out more about our team. And it would link you to the next page in this little website journey. So that people don't get to the bottom of here and are like, okay, I guess I'm done. Like obviously people know that the navigation is up at the top, but that's friction to move your mouse right back up to the top of the screen. So if there's a link down here, you're more likely to keep them moving through your website rather than having them bounce and finish.
Now, one of the things that everyone's trying to do is get people into their database.
Yes.
And people do that primarily using landing pages. But is a website like this and the splash page, the first page you come to the home page, a good place to do that, even on a law firm's website?
From a behavioral science point of view, yes. Because if people go nowhere else, they're likely going to start on your homepage when they visit your website. And so it's giving you, by putting it here, you're giving yourself the greatest chance of catching that person and getting them to share that information with you. But every time they have to move another step, you're going to have drop-off rates because not everybody's going to move to the next step and then the next step and the next step. Every movement or click or scroll, you've just lost some more people.
But if I put them both on the same page, like let's say on the splash page, one's saying contact us, the second one's saying sign up for our mailing list, are those two separate messages that might confuse the audience?
Oh, I see what you're asking me. So I was assuming you were just saying like contact us / give us your email was kind of like the same box. So you're seeing these as like totally different things?
Yeah, because I would think the contact us is more, you want to reach out to me and we have a conversation. Join my mailing list is you're just joining my mailing list.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. So then that goes back to the big question of behavioral goals and purposes of your website. There's not necessarily the one right answer here. It's really about kind of making that strategic decision and then doing accordingly. You can have two. You got to work hard to make it really clear and really easy for people to do two. It's much easier to do one, kind of be single-minded about it, but you can do two.
So if there are situations where you are trying to have one and then a backup if that doesn't work, so contact me, but if not, there's a backup of signing up for my mailing list, is it better to have two sites that you can land up with if you have a cookie or whatever it is? Or is that just not the standard right now?
So when you say two sites, what do you mean? Like a whole other website?
Yeah, basically a whole other website or maybe a whole other splash page. The first being to sign up with me, like contact me right now. The second being sign up for my mailing list. But that sounds onerous almost. Yeah,
that's starting to adding a little more complexity than I think A, you want to deal with, and right. B, you want to try to guide people through. So it's still, I think one website with a really clear homepage is probably the way to go. But it's a good question. And, this is a conversation I end up having with people all the time because most of us want to have people do multiple things, right? It's hard to pick the number one thing in many, many cases. So then you got to start negotiating and figuring out, well, what's most important? How do these things work together? And you got to think about what those goals are, right? Are they competitive goals? Are they goals that go together nicely? Are they confusing in relation to one another, and so on? So it really depends, to answer your question about can I have two.
Makes sense. Okay, please continue.
All right. So those are the big things on the homepage. It's really about kind of that call to action, getting people to the information that you want them to see as quickly as possible to make the most of this real estate.
Got it.
So in terms of your navigation, you've got 3 options up the top, which is our team, services, and contact. And that's all very clear and, by convention and all good.
Should I have more? It's one of those battles I've had with my marketing guy. He insists on more, and I go, no, I want it to be simple. I want it to be clear.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's walking that line between simple and clear and in how the navigation appears. But then if you have too many nested things and people have to go through too many clicks to get to the information that you want, depending on how many categories of info you have, you can start to confuse people a little bit. So as we go through these other pages, I think I probably do have a couple recommendations for 1 or 2 more tabs you might add up here, but not 10,
Got it. Is there a magic number? Is there less than 5 or anything like that? Or
I wouldn't say there's a magic number. There's less is more, but kind of walking that line again of being really clear and making sure the categories are genuinely distinct rather than having one tab leading to actually 3 topics of information just because you wanted to consolidate things. Okay. So I wouldn't say there's a magic number per se. It's more kind of using the right number for the kind of info you're trying to communicate.
To be fair, though, there was a magic number for number of people, which I had no idea about. So 5 is the magic number, after which they're a blob, you said earlier.
That's a rough guideline. Yeah,
of course. Fascinating is my point. Please continue.
Yeah, of course. So let's go to our team, because that's the first one. Loading. All right, beautiful photo of Darshan.
Yeah, there you go.
So here's a really nice bio about you at the top. We then have a thing that says click here for additional details. And then as we scroll, we start to see the names and descriptions of your team members. So we've got a couple people without photos, and it's just a paragraph or 2 or sentence or 2. And then we've got a couple people with lovely photos. And then we have a lawyer team. And then we have some icons down the bottom, which we'll talk about. And then we have a call to action to call us, which I love to see. Okay, so let's begin at the beginning. So I'm going to talk about above the fold again. Couple things. So the last paragraph of your bio is cut off, which we don't want to see. We want people to be able to kind of engage with one idea in one screen.
Yeah.
And again, this is my laptop as well, so this will be different on people's different screens, but disclaimer there. And the bottom of your photo might be cut off a teeny tiny bit, but again, I'm on a laptop. So, but it's good to kind of try to play to the lowest common denominator as much as you can on this sort of thing. So one thing I will say is when people are on anything on a computer, they're not reading, they're skimming. So knowing that, it's best to set up the way that you share your information that's very skimming friendly. So that means things like bullet points. That means things like putting the most important words in bold or different color. That means having text callouts. That means doing more things like icons with simple text like you did on your homepage and less things like blocks of text. So what I would suggest you do with your bio here is give it that treatment of how many, can I do bullet points here, here, here? Can I obviously eliminate language where possible just to make it fit above the fold? Can I bold the things that I really, really want people to see if they see nothing else? Do I want to call out some text in one box here? That sort of thing. So have kind of a session where you're prioritizing what you want people to take away and then make it stupid easy for them to see it.
Love it.
So that's your bio.
Now, I have a question, though, about that bio. One of the things that I wrestled with is how much do you put up there before you say, if you need more, find out, like you can click on this button and find out more. Because you're right, people will skim and they don't want to take those additional frictiony steps of click for additional details. But if I get someone who's interested in clinical trials coming to it and I'm talking about advertising, or someone's coming about advertising talking about clinical trials, I'd lose people. So how do you sort of balance that?
Yeah, so that's where it becomes really important to know your audience, which is why I started with one of those questions at the beginning of like, who's this website for? Yeah. And made you get more and more specific, because that's where you're going to get your guidance on how to prioritize. And I know this is like an especially hard exercise when we're writing a bio about ourselves, because like we know everything about ourselves. So it becomes, we're too close and it's hard to know like what's going to resonate with other people, which is why it's good to talk to other people, right? The people specifically who's you want to view and engage with your website. So this is where you're going to hear a lot of behavioral scientists tell you that context is king. And the context in this case is partially, and to answer your question, the context is who is coming to your website and who do you want to, like, what do they care about? And then that's how you're going to decide. And maybe if, you know, you listed, you have kind of 3 categories of people, the med affairs people, the advertising people, and the clinical trials people, maybe make those your headlines and say, these 3 dot points for med affairs, these 3 dot points for advertising, these 3 dot points for clinical trials, and that's how you lay out your bio. And then you know those people are going to have a really easy time saying, this guy's for me, and he knows what he's talking about in my industry. This is a fit.
Very, very cool. Okay, cool. I'm with you. Absolutely.
Awesome.
It's funny when you said that, though, by the way, and you'd appreciate this more than most. You said context is king as a behavioral scientist. And I've always heard content is king as marketing. So to me, it's interesting. I can't tell whether, how do you choose?
Both. So the context is going to help you figure out the content.
Okay, got it. I'm with you.
Yeah. And when we talk about context, you know, that can branch out into a lot of things, right? So that's going to be, you know, not just when we're talking about website stuff, like that can be talking about like how we lay out a grocery store and you want people to buy your particular product on the grocery store shelf. Like that kind of context, you got to look at it and get really specific, right? Like this can branch out into the physical world. This can branch obviously in the healthcare space, like when we're talking to patients versus doctors about where are they going to be when they're receiving this information, even things like time of day, time of year, like these things impact how we perceive what is coming at us from the outside world. So you can get really, really nitty gritty about it, but it's something that, you know, we don't exist in a vacuum and our brains do not process things in a vacuum. So we're not going to be successful in being persuasive to people if we kind of approach things assuming that they are, which is kind of our default setting of thinking about things, because it's simpler to just be like, this is just kind of an absolute state world, but it's not. Things are moving and changing all the time, and different contexts are going to prime people really differently to receive your information.
So I'm going to use this opportunity to preview a conversation that we'll probably have at some point, which is newsletters. And I've always, every marketing person I've ever spoken to, content is king. The more content you can produce, the better it is. Put it onto your newsletter, share it. Context is king would suggest that I have a newsletter for medical affairs, a newsletter for marketing, and a newsletter for clinical trials. Which one's right? Like, is that too much?
It might be. So when we're talking about context is king for newsletters, I would gear ourselves more towards thinking about the headspace people are going to be in when they're receiving your newsletter. So find out, do they usually read it on their phone while they're drinking their coffee at breakfast? You're going to write it in a really different way and lay it out in a really different way versus if you know they're usually reading it, you know, first thing in the morning when they're settling in at their desk at the office, you know, if people still go to offices, or, you know, their kitchen table, and they've got it on a big screen and it's where they start their day, versus if you know that people are usually opening your emails like in the late afternoon when they're having kind of a lull and they're having their afternoon cookie for a sugar break, right? Those kinds of contextual things are going to be honestly kind of not more important, but like really important when you're thinking about newsletter content style, layout, timing, right? If you know they're going to read it in the afternoon, send it in the afternoon so it gets them when they're kind of in that headspace to read it, right?
Yeah.
Don't send it on like a weekend, obviously, if people read it on Tuesdays, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to your question about like, should I have a separate newsletter for all these people? That might be adding complexity because you're going to be asking people to sign up for different newsletters in the first place. And then you're making them make this kind of branched choice, which you're going to lose people because again, that's a brain cell. So instead, and it sounds like there is going to be overlap in interest, even though like the titles of these people are different. Like the med affairs guy might still want to know about clinical trials or whatever.
But you were in marketing. How often did you care about clinical trials?
It depends on my role. So so that's the other thing. It's not just anybody in marketing. It's someone in marketing who's coming to your lawyer website, right? So if they're interested in law services, they're in a different headspace than like a marketing strategist on a brand team, right? Most likely.
Yeah.
So that's again, I'm always driving people towards that specificity because these little things do make subtle differences in kind of the final output.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Please continue. Sorry. That's
okay. Love the good questions. So we talked about your bio. We talked about skimming. We talked about, yes. So then there's this button that says click here for additional details. When I click here for additional details, I expect to see more information about you. But now I'm taken to this page about
the services page.
Services. So that causes a little bit of cognitive dissonance, which is like mental friction between, in this case, like expectation and reality, basically. And that causes me to be maybe a little bit confused or a little bit just like, oh, what just happened? Obviously not in a major way. This isn't like, you didn't just like offend someone. This isn't a big deal, but like, it's a little bit of friction when we kind of have that expectations don't match reality. So totally fine to guide people to your services page. We talked about doing that on the homepage of kind of guiding people to the next thing. But I would change this call to action so that people's expectations align with the reality that you're about to deliver.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
So instead of like, click here for additional details, like click here to learn about our services, right? Fairly simple, but just setting that expectation so people kind of know where they're going and what they're going to get so that they can get what they want and not get what they're not interested in.
Absolutely.
So then we scroll down and we start seeing the names and brief bios of your team members. So as I was going through this, I felt like I had to scroll. I'm having to scroll like 3 times to get through everybody. And there's, it's 4 people plus a lawyer team, right? So that's a lot of scrolling. And I love that you feature your team. I think that is a really nice thing to do. It helps people get to know you and your team. But I would make it a little bit easier for people to kind of take in the full picture because they're contacting you. They're not contacting like your accountant, right? Probably.
Right.
So I would make this ideally probably fit on like one screen. So do like a 2x2 grid of the bios, names, photos if you have them. Just let me see everybody on one page so I can be like, cool, this is really clear, simple. I can skim this. I can dig in. Oh, okay, he has 4 people rather than this like, when I don't know where this ends, it's like endless scroll. How many people is this? I don't even know. I'm overwhelmed and I should just be focusing on Darshan, really. This is like nice extra info, but this is no offense to your team at all. It's just, it's not the point. The point is,
I agree.
Right. So that's what I would suggest is consolidate this a little bit so it fits on one screen. If you can get photos for everybody, that'd be nice. Obviously, not everybody wants a picture on the internet. Totally understandable. But just lay it out in such a way that it doesn't feel like unfinished, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Also I just have to comment on this. major. Is this the marketing guy that we're always talking about fighting with that I keep disagreeing with? Because
Yes.
I'm now intimidated by someone named Major, and I feel like I don't think I can win in a fight.
One of the nicest guy you'll meet. Having said that, do not cross him in a fight. Him and Ilio Montoya, I believe.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Cool. Okay, so that's my recommendation. Just kind of consolidate this, because
Yeah.
Another kind of mental shortcut that we unconsciously use is like, if this takes up like 3 times as much real estate, it must be 3 times as important, or I need to pay that percentage more relative attention to it compared to something that's, 1/3 of the real estate. So we want to do those subtle things to kind of guide people's attention to what we want them to pay the most attention to.
Got it.
It's a limited resource, so we have to spend it wisely.
Got it.
Cool. So then we scroll past all your lovely teammates and we get to these really nice, really clean, simple 4 icons about kind of how you guys roll. You've got your timely support, your innovative ideas, your solutions, your advice. I would almost put this, because this felt like this was unexpected to me at the end of this page.
Yeah.
So I would put this almost like somewhere towards the top as like part of your
interesting. I like it.
As like the key summary, because you're talking about our team. You say our team is, these 4 lovely things, and then put your consolidated bio that's been skim optimized right below it, and then you've got the 1 page of your team.
Yeah.
So then it's kind of guiding people, because this kind of frames up who you guys are as a group, right? So it's good to put that at the beginning to give people that lens. Then at the very bottom, in this really nice red strip with the white text, you say, call us at this number, which is great. Hold on.
Sure.
It's great. So that begs the question, do you want people to call you or do you want them to email you? What's your preferred?
I find that I would be able to convert easier if I understand the person and their needs better. So my ideal is a call, because I also get spam and you never quite know why they're reaching out on spam. So a call is a real person.
Sure. Calling usually takes people a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a push.
Effort.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change this. I would just add or email us at email.
Now those 2 CTAs, those 2 call to actions, is that confusing?
In this case, I think it's okay.
Okay.
And I think it's okay because the call to action is still like get in touch, right? Contact us. You're just making it really easy. Like the difference between calling someone on the phone and sending someone an email are like clear enough.
Yeah.
And they're meeting people in different headspaces.
Got it.
That you're kind of giving people, you're setting them up for success and completing that call to action of contact us. It's a good question, you're right, and they are slightly different things, but I think in this case, you're more facilitating the desired behavior than adding confusion or complexity. Because for me to make the decision between call you and email you is like very simple. Like I know I don't have time to call this guy, but I need to shoot him a quick email, or I really have a question I want to hear from him on right now. I'll call him.
Yeah.
Versus one of the other choices we were talking about earlier, such as, do I get them to sign up for 3 different newsletters depending on their interests, med affairs, advertising, clinical trials? That's like more of a brain thing where it's like, well, what am I like really interested in? Like, I don't know. And then you start to lose people because it's like, it's a different kind of choice that's going to be a little bit harder to make. Does that help?
It does. It does. I'm wondering though, should it be call us or reach out to us at our contact page and direct them again to the contact page? Is that a smarter decision?
I think in that case, I would just put the contact page at the bottom here.
Okay.
Don't make them go to the next page to type in their contact stuff. Just put the boxes here.
Okay. Okay. I see what you're saying.
You can still have the separate contact page, but
yeah,
you can also kind of replicate those forms right here. And it makes sense on like an our team page, like contact our team, make it easy.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, good question. Sweet. All right. So then, kind of similar to what I said at the homepage, you've got your CTA here. Oh, yep.
Before you continue, lawyers have this tendency to over-lawyer things. So I keep looking at my website right now, and the first thing that pops in my head is, where are all my disclaimers?
That is one of the notes I will have for you on your next page. Because you do have a disclaimer here, and you have a disclaimer on your contact page. So one of my questions for you was going to be like, was there a reason they're only on these 2 pages and not the other pages? Okay. No, that's fine. So there you go. That's a note. Add the disclaimer, all the pages.
But is that too much?
I mean, that's where we start running into like ideal world versus reality of, and you know, we're talking to life sciences folks on this podcast for the most part. We're all very familiar with that, right? So that's where you got to kind of, you know, there's perfect and then there's good, right? And we want to at least be good, and it's okay to put the disclaimer if you need to put the disclaimer. Like,
got it. Okay.
Unfortunately, we're trying to have as much fun as possible, but sometimes we got to do like the boring real life stuff too.
Got it.
Yeah. So besides adding the disclaimer down here, one other thing that I would carry through as a recommendation that I mentioned on the homepage is, to your point about I want to guide people through this journey, put it down here too. So guide them to the services page down here with a, you know, check out our services. I know you had it up here.
Yeah.
But when people get to the bottom of your page, you don't. And it's great you have the CTA to call us. Love it. Keep it. Yeah. But you also, if you want people to have an easy time, if they're like still like not convinced just by reading about your team, they want to know more about your services before they contact you, facilitate that with the hyperlink.
But now I have 3 different CTAs at the bottom, don't I? The call us, the contact information, and now go to the services page.
I'm seeing these as 2, right? Like we talked about, is contact us, and then you give them the option to call or email you, or continue reading because you're not convinced yet, or you want more info.
Got it.
And you can really visually separate these. Like it might not be right now, you've got call us right in the middle. Maybe you put the contact on one side and probably the left side, and then the continue on and read about our services type thing on the right side, because that feels kind of intuitive, like continue.
Got it.
But you're right. And I love that you're pushing back and asking these questions, because these are the kinds of questions we've got to ask. Are we adding friction, or are we kind of facilitating, you know, that easiness for people?
Is there such a thing as busyness friction, if that's a thing? And what I mean by that is, if I came to this website now, like with hindsight, I'm seeing 4 icons on top. I'm going to now have 4 icons at the bottom with the Facebook and Twitter and stuff. I'm going to have the contact us information, the email information, the go to those services page information. Would that just make someone shut down and go, I'm done, I got it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, you know, sometimes it will. So that idea of kind of that visual busyness is basically kind of like a cognitive processing thing, right? Where it's like, I have too many things to take in. My brain doesn't, our brains are not good at multitasking as much as we try to force them to be. They're not. They are single tasking devices. So if we don't design things in a way that takes that into account, then you are going to turn people off, because it's just like kind of overwhelming. So you're right. But some of the things that we did to help with that are, we talked about moving these 4 icons up the top. So then this can just become much cleaner, right? And then we can really just focus on the contact us CTA and facilitating that movement through to the next page if people so desire. And then I would argue that these kind of social media icons are not overwhelming. I think these are something that just visually, the way you've set out, are not like in my face, as they shouldn't be. And I think these are such a convention of websites these days that I think people kind of know to skim over this last little bit, unless they're like actively looking for your Twitter or something.
Got it. Okay.
So I don't think these are working against you in any way. Cool. But it's a good question.
Is it better to maybe have that phone? So maybe like have a phone icon next to the Facebook icon, and it's in blue for argument's sake, just to sort of say, call us, without ever using the word call us at 302.
I love that. You're thinking in a skimming headspace. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do that. Or you can even, as part of your CTA here, you can put a phone next to the text so that people can kind of use their simpler brains of not having to read words and decode sentences, and they say, phone, I know what that means, right?
Right.
Half less brain cell. It's a win.
Got it.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I mean, you can definitely have your phone down here if you want. I think it's easier probably to list your phone number here because I can't phone you. I can't phone you from my computer. I don't know if some people can, but so me clicking that phone means I have to do an extra step to find your phone number. So I would just you can do a phone picture, but write your phone number next to it.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Love the questions. All right. So let's talk about your services page. Clicking. All right. So this page, I'm going to make some of the same recommendations as last time in terms of, we know that people skim, they don't read. So we want people to, come to this page and find pretty icons with very simple headings. We want people to find dot points. We want people to find bold text or really very, careful use of call out text for the most important things, so that they can get what they need to get without ever reading a full paragraph.
Got it.
Or even 2 sentences in a row if they really don't want to. And we do that to kind of, give that information as easily as possible. You can still have the detailed info for people who really want to read about it, but you want to hook as many people in as you can. And you're going to put a lot of people off if the first thing they see is a full paragraph, right?
Yeah.
So we want to kind of ease them into it with these kind of simple ways of communicating. So the way this page works is it opens up, you've got services as a heading and then a paragraph about you guys. And then you've got kind of these 3 drop-down boxes below. And then I click on them and the other blurb disappears. So I can only open one at a time, which is fine. But what I found confusing is I didn't realize when I first came to this page that services was its own drop-down box. I thought that was the landing text, and then there were 3 drop-downs. So then I was like, wait, where did the services go? And I clicked on research. And I was like, I get it. But that was another moment of tiny little confusion, which we talked about eliminating earlier. So
don't pull people out of the space is what I'm hearing you say. They're in a zone, let them stay in the flow.
Yeah, I love that. Stay in the flow. Exactly. And if we're in a flow, that means there's no friction. Yeah. So totally spot on. So I would almost recommend going, think about, so what I sometimes tell people in a seriously 100% non-condescending way, just this is how people like to take in information, is think about if you were making a children's storybook, how would you lay out the information in that case? Or alternatively, think about how IKEA instruction manuals work, right? They could write paragraphs and paragraphs, but they put really simple, clear pictures and you can usually get it, right? Yeah. So we want to kind of take that principle here. And I wonder if it would be useful to lay these out kind of like you did with some of your other sections of your website where you had the really nice 4 icons and then descriptions underneath. So that's what
I'm with you 100% until you pulled me out of the flow by saying IKEA. And I'm going, wait a second, I've never built an IKEA piece without wanting to tear my hair out.
Really? I think you're right. A lot of people feel that way. But I'm holding IKEA up as obviously they take it to the extreme of simple visual communication. Yeah. There are value in adding words, which often they don't, which might be helpful. So they probably take it too far. But if I pick an extreme example that, we can kind of meet in the middle.
Points made. Yeah, absolutely.
But you're right. It's good to acknowledge IKEA is imperfect sometimes.
Fair enough.
You're totally right. So what we really want to do is we're going to make kind of use the word salience is going to come up here in terms of people need to have the most important information jump out at them. So however we can do that visually and make it salient with those different visual techniques that we've talked about, you're going to be setting yourself up for success and communicating in a clear manner to your audience.
Got it. Love it.
The one other big thing on this page that I was wanting to take a note on is in your research box, you've got your description of what you guys do, and then you've got this hyperlink about you take pride in helping companies develop transparent, patient-focused clinical trials, which is awesome. And then when I click on that, that actually takes me to like a whole nice YouTube video. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? Why is this hiding in a drop-down box on our services page in a hyperlink? This should like show this off. This is cool. So that will link back to something I said much earlier about should we have more things in our navigation bar? And this is one thing that I would suggest you add, which is like in the press or
Video
media or something. And you can put like your videos, you can put if you have other things, you know, that you guys have written up. I think another thing I'll get to in the search bar was when I just tested the search functionality before, and I searched the word law, and a ton of stuff came up on like a blog, and I was like, I don't even know how else to find this blog. So that should be like its own thing, because showing that thought leadership is going to be helpful in persuading people like this guy, you know, works the way I want him to work. He knows the stuff I want him to know. He's got these really cool opinions. Don't make people work to get to know you, right?
Now, here's a question: to make someone contact you, is it good to show opinions, or do you land up alienating the people who disagree with you?
So counter question: if you show no opinions at all, and then somebody calls you up by chance or whatever, and then you talk, and they're like, oh, wow, your opinions are totally not a fit with what I'm looking for. You just wasted both of your times. So you want to give people like a little bit of an idea of who you are. Like, I don't envision that's something that happens to you often or at all, but like to answer your question with kind of the counter situation, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And the other thing is part of what we're doing with showing this thought leadership in its own kind of lane on your navigation bar with your videos and your blogs, and if you guys ever get in the press or you have testimonials, that's all kind of a social proof of who you are, and kind of goes back to almost content is king a little bit, where the more people kind of come in contact with you, your way of thinking, your way of speaking, the more familiar and comfortable they're going to start to feel with you, which is actually going to facilitate them contacting you.
Suzanne, before you continue, one of the things we do need to do, just so people are aware and they're seeing the amazing work you're doing, how can people reach you?
Contact me. Yes, that's a very important call to action. So you can reach me very easily on LinkedIn. You can search up my name, Suzanne Kirkendall, and I'd love to speak with you there. Or you can send me an email, suzanne.kirkendall@bvanudgeunit.com. And I'd love to talk with you about any kind of behavioral science thing that's on your mind.
Now, do you only do pharma-related stuff?
So my background and specialty is in healthcare, pharma, public health. But as a BVA Nudge unit, we actually work across all sectors. So private, public, FMCG, transportation, you know, name it. If there's people there, we can probably help, right? Because people have brains. So, and, you know, I end up doing a lot of fun cross training as well, which is actually super fun. So I'm kind of your go-to healthcare gal, but also I can either answer your questions about other sectors or point you to someone else who is even more specialized in that than I am.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much. So
thank you.
Please continue.
Yes. So I was telling you that you should show off more, basically. Tell people about all your great thoughts, because that facilitates a sense of familiarity, which if something is familiar to us, we start to like it. It doesn't matter, even if like we're kind of maybe lukewarm on it before, if we just, the simple act of like repetition and of either a core message or just of like somebody's name, ideas, thoughts, we're going to like them more just because it's familiar. Our brain likes what's familiar. So that's part of why you should put your blog where people can find it so that they can read about you, get to know you, so then you start to feel familiar before they've even reached out.
So, I mean, there's a portion of me that goes, that makes so much sense, that absolutely the people can get social proof and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But there's a part of me that goes, stay focused on the call to action. The call to action is contact me.
Yeah.
Why do I even have that single video? Maybe I should take that down and say, contact me. When have you gone too far?
Too far and being too single-minded?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you haven't given people a reason to do what you want them to do, then you've gone too far.
Got it.
As like a really simple answer.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have to, as you said at the beginning, one of the top advertisers on the internet is law firms. And so you're going to, and we talked about this, you got to differentiate yourself a little bit because otherwise people are going to have no motivation to contact you over contacting anyone else. So this is a space, goes back to context is king, where knowing kind of just that one piece about the competitive landscape, you need to say, okay, well, for them to want to contact me over somebody else, they need to know more about me than, you know, obviously your bio is a great way to start. Getting to know your team is a great thing to do, but then they need to know about your work a little bit more by seeing a little bit more of it in action. And that's where kind of that sharing your blog, sharing any kind of information more about your way of thinking is going to facilitate that, because then they can look at that and feel good about contacting you and know that you're the right person for them to contact.
Love it. Okay.
Love the questions. Cool. Okay. So that is, I had one other thing. So this, I will preface this with saying I'm not, again, a web designer. So I don't know. I just kind of make recommendations, and a lot of times it falls into the bucket of like, I hope you can wave your internet design magic wand and just like do this. But I understand, again, there is reality, but this is a small thing. But when I click on this hyperlink to the YouTube, I would recommend, if you can, if there's a way to do it, make that open in another tab. Don't make me open it in the same tab and hence leave your website.
Got it. Yep.
Even though it's easy for me to, you know, click back and go to it. If people get on YouTube, YouTube is very good at keeping you on YouTube, as I'm sure we all know. You can fall down that rabbit hole, even if you started, you know, with something quite, you know, relevant. You can quickly get off track. So if you open it in a separate tab, it's just a little bit easier for people to like return to you.
Yeah.
As opposed to lose them down the YouTube rabbit hole.
That's good. Yeah.
All right. So last big page is your contact page. The grand call to action. I loved that you put your photo here, because we talked about at the beginning, like people connect with photos of individual people smiling, looking at the camera, and that's exactly what you've got. So I thought that was awesome. So it makes me feel connected. It makes me feel like I'm contacting like a real person, not like some faceless internet thing that's never going to reply to me. So that was really cool. That was a good choice.
Awesome.
Little tweaks here. So you did great. You've got your call to action, your key things above the fold with your key fields so people can enter their info. I would do like little things. So like where it says message as like the prompt text in the message box, put a verb in there. Write your message, right? Or type your message here. Little things like that, right?
But why would you not do that for give me your name? Why do it for the message but not for the others?
Name, phone number, email address, those are fairly straightforward, but I think that's also going to go back to the setting of this. Can people just give you their name, phone number, and email and submit, or do they have to write a message? Is that mandatory for them to submit?
No, it's not mandatory, but yeah.
So then at that point, is it in your best interest if they write a message? Is it helpful for you? Probably, right? Yeah. To get a little bit more context. So you just want to like encourage people, make it feel welcoming and make it feel a little bit more personable.
Got it.
And then you've got a really friendly thing on the side of like, we can help. And I love that. I would just reinforce the call to action here. Like, we can help, contact us today, or, you know, whatever, like really kind of bang it home here, because this is a contact page.
Yeah.
Question. what channel do you most want people to use to get in touch with you? Do you want them to email you the most? Do you want them to call you the most? Earlier we talked about calling.
Yeah, exactly.
So then I would put that at the top here.
Okay. Yeah.
And then probably the second thing you want them to do is email you. And then the third thing you'll want is a postcard. I love postcards, but they're not very fast. So I would just reorder these here.
Here's a question now. For from a spam perspective, I did a Darshan at kulkarnilawfirm.com.
I saw that. I was wondering what that was about.
But is that not intuitive and you're forcing people to change? Okay.
Yep. So that's also something like, this goes back to a little bit of like kind of the, not cognitive dissonance, but just like a little bit of like, it's not something I'm expecting to see. And this is kind of a very conventional web page. Yeah. There's conventions around it, which is not a bad thing. That's good because it makes it easy for me to understand it quickly because I'm used to this kind of thing as a user of the internet. So then when I see something like, I don't know if I just don't use the internet enough, but I don't really see this often where you've replaced what we're talking about. For those who can't see is in his email, instead of like the @ symbol, he's written @ in like square brackets. Again, to deter spammers. But that means when I go to actually email you, first of all, I have to copy and paste this. This isn't a hyperlink. So if you can make this a hyperlink that like opens up my email, even better. But also, even if I copy paste, I have to then like go in there with my mouse and like get the right symbols and change it.
Yeah.
So that is like a tiny little friction. I mean, if people want to contact you and they're at this page at this point, like, I don't think this is going to ruin anyone, like too many people's day, but like, if we want to go best case, that's what I would recommend.
Okay. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. So reorder these. If you really want people to call you, like bold this text, like you bolded, we can help. And then put the others, like not bold, like just kind of visually guide people towards what you want them to pay attention to in those sorts of ways.
So let me ask you a question. Let's say I'm another lawyer and I go, I love what Suzanne did and I want to bring her on to help me improve my website because my website designers were great, but they came at it from how to make it look pretty, not from the perspective of how to make it function for the function I want. I guess my question for you is, how do I know it worked?
Yeah, so that's where I start to get into my disclaimers that I probably should have said at the beginning of, this is not, like what we're doing here is like really fun, on the spot, quick, right? We're doing this like an hour. Yeah. But this, if I were to do this like for a client on a project, I would start with a lot of kind of that baseline data, really dig into understanding more about your audience, right? I might even do some primary research with that audience. To understand really in a lot more detail, who are these people? What are they doing now versus what do we want them to do? What are the barriers in between what they do now and what we want them to do that we need to fix?
Do your clients know that information though? Or do you do it on your own?
It depends, right? So some of the information they will know, or they'll know like, this is the point in the sign up process where everybody drops off, right? They'll be like, I don't really know what, or maybe they'll see like there's like 2 points. So like, I don't really know like why, but we know this, right? And so I can come in and say, okay, so here's what I'm seeing from behavioral science perspective about why this is happening and the best way to stop it from happening, right? So when it comes to doing this like full-fledged, you would get the data. So like bounce rates, click rates, all of those things, again, specifically for a website, but you can audit like a paper brochure if you want, or like a menu board or whatever. But you start with those stats. So then you know at the end what we're trying, well, at the beginning what we're trying to change. And at the end, once you've implemented these changes, how well did it work? Do we need to tweak something a little bit further? Because again, we go back to that context idea of, you know, I can give you all the good recommendations based on best practices and what I know about your audience. But once you put it out into the wild, there's probably always going to be a little bit something that's a little bit different this time versus, you know, all the other best practice examples. And so you're going to have to tweak it just to be just for you and your audience. And that's a normal, expected gold standard part of doing any kind of behavioral science intervention is test and learn.
Makes sense. Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
Cool. And then, yeah, that's basically, I like that you've got kind of the little map there. That's very nice. So people have a sense of space. And then we talked about kind of your search function. So when I searched up blogs, yeah, you had a ton of like really awesome blog articles, recaps, comments. And I was like, dang, this guy needs to show off more. You're being a little too humble here, Darshan.
Okay.
So
that has never been something someone's ever accused me of. So.
On this page, I will say it's true. If I had to work this hard to see your thought leadership, then it's not out there enough. So, and then I think, here you had an option to sign up for your newsletter. And I don't know if you're still doing the newsletter, I assume so. This was the only page I saw this on the site. So if you really want people to sign up for your newsletter, I know we talked about this earlier, I would not hide it here.
But you also said that we shouldn't have so many options.
Yeah, but if people might still, like, if I have to go to your search bar, search law, and then notice on the right that you have a newsletter sign up, like, that's going too far the other way.
Got it. Okay, I'm with you.
But you're right. Yeah, you do still need to prioritize your behavioral objectives and the layout accordingly. But it's okay to make it a little easier to find your newsletter if you want people to sign up. If you don't want people to sign up, obviously disregard all of this. But
of course. Yeah, no, please don't sign up for anything. That would be a terrible idea.
Don't talk to me. Leave me alone. Leave my website. Get out of here. Get off my lawn. Yeah, totally.
So let me ask you this question. This is, again, you're uniquely positioned to answer a question like this. But some advertisements I've seen take the opposite approach. And what I mean by that is saying something like what you just said, which is don't come to my website, or this is not the website for you. Mm-hmm. How does that work? I mean, and I gather that they're very functional because people are drawn to them. I want to see what you don't want me to see angle. But does that conflict with the idea of behavioral science, where you're trying to force them down a certain road as opposed to telling them not to go down that road?
So to make sure I'm understanding, are you talking about like kind of this idea of like, this is a secret, this is semi-exclusive, you're going to have to like work for this? Like, is that what you're saying? Like sometimes that's like the angle?
I'll tell you specifically where this, I think there was like a Howard Stern ad, and it basically said, it was a jewelry store in Philadelphia, if I remember correctly. And it basically said something to the effect of, don't let your girlfriend come here. And
okay.
Years old, but yeah. But it was obviously tongue-in-cheek.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't an exclusivity thing, though I can see where it would be an exclusivity thing. But that's what sort of drove me and made me ask the question. Yeah,
okay. So this one is going to go back to knowing your audience's headspace really, really well and why it's so important.
Okay.
Right? And so that was clearly based on some kind of understanding around the dynamic between, and they're not looking at people with wives, right? Like that was a very specific language to use, girlfriend, not wife, right? Because they're really honing in on a very specific segment by using language, like phrasing that exact sentence the way that they did. Not just the idea of, oh, don't let her come here, like, oh, she's going to blow all the money, but also if they were talking to someone with a wife, they would probably, they might take the same angle, but they might more veer into the territory of like the most exclusive anniversary present you can buy, because someone who's married to a wife as opposed to someone who still just has a girlfriend might have different headspace around jewelry stores. So that, I mean, I don't know this ad. I don't know what was behind their thinking. I don't know who they were actually intending to target, but like, that's where you start to look at the very, very specifics of understanding your audience on the deeper level, right? So for that very specific segment of people, that was something that they decided was going to resonate. I mean, obviously it stuck with you because it was different. It's kind of funny. And so, in that way, I guess it was a little bit successful. But yeah, no, it's a good question. So in terms of that one, I think that's less about adding friction because, they're not making it harder to go to the jewelry store, right? They're just
but
communicating a message where they're getting a little bit deeper on that. It's not a call to action per se. It's kind of a funny way of getting at the motivation.
But I will, it's funny you said, is it making it harder to get to the jewelry store? I still think of their tagline on the other corner of 8th and Walnut. You don't know how many hours I've spent visualizing what the word other corner means. And I literally having to walk my dog by there now all the time. And all I see is that thing and go, oh, that's the other corner. Looks like any other corner. I don't get it. But it's stuck in my head for years at this point.
There you go. And so I think the jewelry store was probably in a similar pickle as what you were talking about in terms of, I got to stand out among a crowded field, right? And relate this back to kind of your life sciences audience. This is something I talk to a lot of pharma clients about in terms of, we are the 5th product to market. Like, how do I stand out to my HCP prescribing audience or my DTC patient audience? Like, this is where you start to get, obviously in pharma, we can't get quite as fun and funky usually, but that's usually what's kind of driving that. So that tagline of being a little bit different for them. And then that other corner is literally we are the other, we are different. And that's probably where that was coming from too, is trying to break out of the noise of a crowded field.
So let's go back to the question I've sort of been hinting at throughout this whole thing, which is you're always trying to stand out, but the conflict I'm seeing is with marketing, you're trying to stand out, and with behavioral science, you're trying to fit in and be in the flow. How do you have those two work together? Do you end up working primarily with marketing and website companies, or do you go, I'm usually coming in fixing things because they hadn't considered these options? When are they usually calling you?
So we do a lot of things beyond just websites.
Sure.
So we'll do, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but we can redesign your hospital layout so that people have an easier time navigating, right? That's a case study on our website, totally different thing, right? So people come to us for all sorts of problems or challenges. And again, it all boils down to, are you working with humans in some capacity or another? We can probably help, but that's going to be a big variety of things. So it could be medication adherence, could be prescribing habits. Those are some of the really common questions that we get. In terms of, do people usually come to me from scratch, or is it usually we've got this thing and it's not working how we want, how do we fix it? I'd say it's a split, but more commonly the latter. Partly because behavioral science is still newer in kind of the private sector healthcare space, people using it. So, they built their website a while ago, what probably wasn't as commonly spoken about then. This is still kind of newer to people in this space. So, usually a lot of times it's kind of retrofitting or correcting or improving, and that's totally fine. The best case scenario is if you're starting from scratch, because behavioral science, what we're talking about today, is very, very tactical. I'm talking about change this word, move this icon, and that's going to help you. But behavioral science can also guide much bigger picture strategy. It can guide, if you're looking at a patient support program, it can guide the entire cadence, all of the steps, the timing, the type of content that should be in there. That more strategic level stuff is also very much in the realm of behavioral science. So when you know that, which a lot of people don't know that yet, when you know that, then you can say, this is foundational. This is not just the cherry on top at the end in my tactics. Yeah. And then when you can pull it through in that way, from foundational strategy all the way to tactical execution, that's when you're making the absolute most of all of the tools that are available to you. And then you're really going to get a really cool impact there. And those are kind of the most exciting projects, but I wouldn't even say that, but they are exciting projects. But that's usually less common, because usually, how often is anyone at work starting something totally from scratch anymore, right? It's more common to have something that you're working with and trying to optimize. both work, both are fine. They're just kind of different.
Before we continue, because I think we're starting to get towards the edge
Yes.
of time, but how can people reach you again?
So definitely please reach out. Obviously, I love talking about this stuff. So get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Just search up my name, Suzanne Kirkendall, or send me an email at suzanne.kirkendall@bvanudgeunit.com.
Awesome. Suzanne, did we have any more left, or did we kind of?
That was it. You did a great job. Thank you for being a wonderful sport. This was a ton of fun. And like we talked about at the beginning, this kind of exercise is kind of the most useful exercise to help other people learn, which is why we're doing this on a podcast for other people to watch, right? So I just want to kind of acknowledge and thank you for being such a good sport and for sharing this with other people to learn from and benefit from as well.
No, thank you so much again, and we'll talk about having you back very, very soon. So thank you again, Suzanne.
Thank you.